Welcome to the Travel Gluten-Free podcast, where you can listen in on how to lead a gluten-free lifestyle with more fun and ease. Travel gluten-free is like having a best friend by your side to give you the most up-to-date gluten-free traveler information. Let Travel Gluten-Free be your #1 source for tips, tricks, and advice you can use to safely navigate your next gluten-free travel adventure. Enjoy food, enjoy travel, and enjoy life. And now, here's your show host, Illiquity.
Hey friends, Illiquity here for another episode of the Travel Gluten-Free podcast. This is episode 4 of season 9. I'm so glad to be bringing you another season of the Travel Gluten-Free podcast. Before we jump into today's show today, I wanted to let you know that I wanted to give a shout out to my brand collaboration partner, who is Nema Sensor. It's a great way to travel when you have celiac disease, or if you have another autoimmune condition that you are eating gluten-free for medical reasons, because it will detect gluten in your food. It's a really great tool to have. I found out when I was eating Cracker Barrel, all of the food had gluten in it. Like, even though I said gluten allergy and they cooked it on separate surfaces, and apparently like their green beans are cooked in a separate pot, it was all cross-contaminated. So I stopped eating at Cracker Barrel altogether. So it's a great way to figure out where the gluten is in your food and what foods to avoid and what places to avoid. I also found out that a local pizza place who did gluten-free pizza, I ate the pizza. I watched them make it on a covered surface and all this stuff, but there was clearly too much gluten in the air and it was cross-contaminated. And when I ate it, and when I got home, I was sick and I had take home in a box. So I took a piece of that pizza, threw it in my Nema sensor, and it came up with gluten like in seconds. It's a really great way to figure out where you can and can't eat and what you should and shouldn't eat when you have celiac disease and you are eating gluten-free. I wanted to ask you too, also to go to my newly revamped website at www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Check out the new site. Let me know what you think. But the one thing you want to definitely do is scroll to the bottom of the welcome page, because I have a free ebook for you, the 10 tips to traveling gluten-free, which you can download for free. You just put your name and email in there and you can instantly download that. And it's really great tool to have before you plan your travel. So let's jump into today's episode, which is Celiac Disease Awareness Month. So happy Celiac Disease Awareness Month, my friends. I am going to give you today a history of celiac disease. You are not going to believe this. But a lot of people think it's a modern thing. It is actually not. It is actually a thing that has been in our gene pool for a very long time. And we're going to talk about the history of celiac disease and some celiac support groups that you can go to for help with your celiac disease as well. And of course, if you need help with travel planning and stuff like that, definitely contact me on my page, travelglutenfreepodcast.com, and hit me up on my contact page if you need some help with traveling. I'd be glad to help you do that. Here is the history of celiac disease. I'm reading this from the beyondceliac.org website, where they have a history of celiac disease. So the first case that was known for somebody who may have had celiac disease was an archaeological dig in Cosa, Italy in 2008, when they were doing the archaeological dig, revealed a woman who was about 18 to 20 years old from the 1st century AD. So that's the year 100, basically, with signs of failure to thrive and malnutrition, which doctors now know is a huge red flag for celiac disease. It says the skeleton showed the presence of the celiac gene HLA-DQ2.5 and damage typically seen from celiac disease. So she may have had damage in her bones, but you can actually DNA a skeleton, even if it is really old skeleton, which is really cool. So you can do a DNA sampling of that skeleton, and that's what they did. And they found out clearly they couldn't diagnose her with a small intestinal sample because all of the soft tissue was probably decayed off, but they did know that she did have the gene and she has all the symptoms. So she most likely did have celiac disease. Between the year 100 and 200 AD, Arrhenius of Cappadocia wrote the first medical description of celiac disease. He clinically described the earliest account of celiac disease. So he says he called it the celiac affection. He named it the celiac affection because coliacus is the Greek word cholia, which means abdomen. And he said of the disease, if the stomach be irretentive of the food, and if it pass through undigested and crude, and nothing ascends into the body, we call such persons celiacs. And basically what that means is like, if your body's not breaking it down and digesting it and it's coming out the other end and it looks like we're basically how it came in, that's what they call us for someone with celiac. So he actually was diagnosing people with celiac disease 2000 years ago, which is pretty incredible. In the 1600s, the philosopher Blaise Pascal is believed to have suffered from celiac disease. Philosopher Blaise Pascal may have suffered from and perhaps died from celiac disease. He suffered from abdominal pain through his childhood that continued and progressed into adulthood. He's said to have experienced other celiac disease symptoms such as neurological issues, migraines, and depression. In the 1800s, Matthew Bale describes a diarrheal disorder that improves on a rice-based diet. Of course, because you're eating a rice-based diet, you're not eating gluten. So the British physician and pathologist Matthew Bailey describes a chronic gastrointestinal condition that responded to a rice-heavy diet. He noted in his papers that those who suffered from the disorder experienced chronic diarrhea and malnutrition. He observed that some patients have appeared to derive considerable advantage from living almost entirely upon rice. The rice-heavy diet would almost be likely very low in gluten or even gluten-free, depending on what other ingredients were eaten in the rice. And of course, would help people with celiac disease because if you're not eating the gluten, you won't get sick. Wow, eating a lot of rice kind of sucks. All right. In 1887, Samuel Gee writes the first modern medical description of celiac disease and hypothesizes it can be treated through diet. So English doctor Samuel Gee says people afflicted with celiac affection can be cured by diet. He first presented the modern definition of celiac disease at a lecture at a hospital for sick children in London. He theorized the disease needed to be treated through food, saying he believed if a person were to be cured, it would be through their diet. Smart man. He tried multiple types of diets with his patients, including a Dutch muscle diet. Oh gosh, that had to be horrible. However, during his lifetime, he was never able to pinpoint which food triggered the disease, which would have been really hard. And in 1924, Dr. Sidney Haas treats children with celiac disease with his banana diet. And this is the most modern one that is known. So American pediatrician Sidney Haas announces a banana diet that treats celiac disease after treating children with a diet high in bananas and forbidding starches. Before Dr. Haas's banana diet, more than 30% of children with celiac disease died. Wow, that is a huge, incredible number. That means out of 10 children with celiac disease, 3 of them died because with celiac disease, if you didn't know this, if you're new to the disease, when you eat gluten, it damages your small intestine and it damages the villi, which are the hairs in your small intestine. And those hairs do 2 extremely important things. One is they absorb your vitamins and minerals and all of your nutrition. And 2 is they make lactase. So lactase is the enzyme that digest lactose, which is milk sugar, which is why a lot of people who have celiac disease, when they find out, they can't drink milk because they're lactose intolerant. When you have celiac disease, your body attacks the small intestine and breaks down and withers down all of these little hairs that make lactase and also absorb your vitamins. So you can die, even though you're eating food, you can die from malnutrition because you simply are not absorbing any vitamins or nutrients out of your food. And so in the 1900s, if you are a child with celiac disease, you had a 3 in 10 chance of dying, a 30% chance of dying, which is really sad. Continue on with beyondceliac.org. Since the diet was gluten-free, albeit unintentionally, and high in calories, it helped children with the disease heal their villi and their lives were saved. Parents from all over the United States brought their children with celiac disease to Dr. Haas to be treated. The banana diet continued to be used to treat children until the early 1950s. It did have its downsides, as many believe that once the children were healed, they were cured and could go back on a normal gluten diet. And then they, of course, got sick again and had a host of other side effects from eating gluten because they were celiac. In the 1940s, Dr. Willem Dick theorized that the wheat is triggering celiac disease and develops a wheat-free diet to treat celiac disease patients. So Dutch pediatrician William Carel Dick hypothesized that wheat protein can be the culprit to triggering celiac disease. He made the connection. I remember reading about this before and hearing about this before during World War II, when during the Dutch famine in World War II, bread was unavailable in the Netherlands. And he noticed that throughout this time, the mortality rate for celiac disease dropped to 0 in his hospital. So he figured out through Dutch famine, because in World War II, there were a lot of supply chain issues. I mean, you think we had supply chain issues during the pandemic. They weren't getting like hardly anything. And so because nobody was eating bread, he figured out that wheat at least was a culprit. Of course, he didn't know that it was specifically the gluten. He said wheat protein. I don't know that he also made the connection with barley and other things that also contain gluten. So in 1952, 12 years later, a medical team publishes their findings about wheat and rye flour and celiac disease. So the English medical team shared results of studies of showing how celiac disease patients improved when wheat flour and rye flour were removed from their diets. Gluten, the protein found in wheat, barley, and rye, was later pinpointed as the exact trigger. Okay, in 1956, Dr. Margot Scheiner performs her first oral biopsy on a child with celiac disease. So German-British gastroenterologist and medical researcher Margot Scheiner discovers a new technique to biopsy intestines. This biopsy instrument helped in the diagnosis of celiac disease, among other GI disorders. She has been credited with launching the specialty of modern pediatric gastroenterology. And if you don't know what that means, a pediatric gastroenterologist is there's adult medicine and there's pediatric medicine. And because a lot of times symptoms or things will show differently in kids, and it's also harder to figure out what's wrong with kids because they can't always correctly describe what's going on with them. So anything that's pediatric means it's a medical doctor that specializes in children in that specialty. So she was a doctor that specialized in children's gastrointestinal issues. So anything that has to do with the digestive system. All right. In the 1970s, celiac disease is recognized as an autoimmune disease and the genes are pinpointed. So in the 1970s, the HLA-DQ2 gene is associated with celiac disease and dermatitis herpetiformis, which is the eczema that you can get as a secondary side effect from celiac disease. Then in the 1980s, the connection between celiac disease and autoimmune diseases such as type 1 diabetes, which is also autoimmune, becomes accepted within the medical community. And by the early 1990s, celiac disease is accepted as an autoimmune disease. So they knew it was a disease. They just didn't know it was autoimmune related until the 1990s. And with the specific gene, either HLA-DQ2 or HLA-DQ8. While in 1997, the role of the antigen tissue transglutamase, TTG, in celiac disease is also discovered. All right, my friends. So we're going to take a quick break right here. When we come back, we're going to continue on with the history of celiac disease and organizations you can use for nutritional help and helping with identifying some of the things with celiac disease and getting some really good resources. Gluten-free friends, it's Liquidy. We know that traveling gluten-free can be hard, but you know what? It doesn't have to be impossible. You can still travel and be independent, have fun, and be in control of your life. Travel the way you want to, even with celiac disease. I know because I travel extensively several months out of the year with celiac disease. If you want to get started on learning more about how to travel gluten-free, grab my free ebook, 10 Tips for Traveling Gluten-Free. In my ebook, you're going to find the basics of traveling gluten-free, from the questions you need to ask when dining out to air travel and cruise travel advice. You're going to find my top tips that I've learned from my expertise. Get your free ebook today by visiting my newly revamped website, www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Go to the bottom of the welcome page where you're going to see the beautiful Caribbean boat picture. Click there and sign up today. Receive your free ebook, which is going to be dropped directly into your inbox. Remember, go to www.travelglutenfreepodcast.com. Go to the bottom of the welcome page and get your free ebook and find out my top tips for traveling safely when you're gluten-free. All right, we are back with season 9, episode 4, Happy Celiac Disease Awareness Month of May. So today, I'm just going over a history of celiac disease for Celiac Disease Awareness Month, and I hope you are educating people on celiac disease. I know I always do when I travel. I'm educating our travel tour walking guides, our bicycle guides, our restaurant staff, restaurant owners. My business network, is rarely a moment where I don't get an educational opportunity for celiac disease. And one of the things to know when you're educating people about celiac disease, a really good idea to do it from the perspective of matter-of-factly and not doing it from feel so sorry for me. Because yes, you can do it from a feel so sorry for me perspective, but it loses its punch when you do that. So when I educate people on celiac disease, I tell people it's like when I eat something with gluten, because a lot of waiters and waitresses don't know because they don't have it, right? I mean, mean, it would be like if somebody had arthritis and you didn't have arthritis to know what that feels like on a daily basis. So I deal with chronic pain in my joints and my muscles. I haven't figured out if it's arthritis or not yet. I'm working on that. But I mean, I know what that feels like to be in chronic pain every day in my joints and muscles. I can tell people what it's like, and I tell them, and this is why I do this and this, but I don't do it from the perspective of you need to feel sorry for me, because for me, that's not a good mindset to have. And it's not a good way to portray yourself to other people when you're talking about celiac disease or a chronic illness. What I do is when I tell people about celiac disease, I tell them, I said, celiac disease is autoimmune. So it's not just a stomach ache. It's actually a disease that your body attacks the small intestine. So if I eat gluten, I have a cross between food poisoning and the flu. And the first 8 hours, I'm stuck in the bathroom getting sick, and I'm sick for 2 to 3 weeks afterward. And it takes me that long to recover. And people are like, wow, I didn't know it was that bad. I'm like, yeah. And this is why people with celiac disease have to be very careful when they eat, and you can't eat cross-contaminated food. And so if you explain it to them that way, then they become empathetic to what's going on with you. So because a lot of people just don't get it. A lot of people don't understand. And of course, like if it's a place that's not understanding and you're at a restaurant and you're trying to order food, then definitely walk out. But like, especially when I'm on a cruise, I will just tell my waiters and waitresses why they have to be so careful with my food. And they always are, but I always like to tell them so they understand, because if people understand the why behind what you're doing, then they are more likely to respect what you're doing and more likely to be careful with your food. So keep that in mind when you're out and about educating people about celiac disease, especially during Celiac Disease Awareness Month. All right, so let's continue on with the history of celiac disease. So in 2003, the organization Beyond Celiac is founded. It was originally named the National Foundation for Celiac Awareness. Beyond Celiac was established as the first celiac disease patient advocacy group dedicated to driving diagnosis and enabling access to gluten-free food. Later, Beyond Celiac pivots to research for treatments and a cure after studies show that a gluten-free diet is not enough for many people with celiac disease. And in 2006, the first potential drugs for celiac disease began the clinical trial process. Larazotide acetate, formerly known as AT-1001, is an 8 amino acid peptide. It was one of the first potential medical treatments for celiac disease. Since then, many have joined the race for treatments, and studies continue to show the burden of the gluten-free diet, along with the fact that many with celiac disease aren't healing despite following the diet strictly. And that could be a cross-contamination issue. So one of the things you definitely need to look out for, my friends, is pet food. Pet food is like, I mean, there's wheat all in it. I feed my cats grain-free, but our dog does not get grain-free. So I have to wash my hands every time I feed my dog. And it's kind of a pain in the butt, but I know I get cross-contaminated from it because that also shows up in my testing as gluten in my diet, even though I know I do not eat any gluten because I'm very careful with my diet. Also, I eat out once a week. So that also, depending on where I'm eating, I can get cross-contaminated there too. So cross-contamination is a real thing, and I definitely get cross-contaminated every once in a while, even though I'm very, very careful when I eat. Some resources you can use, of course, beyondceliac.org, and I will put these in the show notes, so scroll underneath the album cover or look in the description of the video to find them. Beyond Celiac is a great celiac disease support group. There's also nationalceliac.org, which is the National Celiac Association. There's also celiac.org, which is a celiac disease foundation. And all of these that I'm mentioning right now are actually in the United States. And wouldn't it be really great if they all got together and made one big, like super massive celiac foundation? Because then we'd have one place to go instead of three. All these places can combine their resources and do more for our community. I think that would be an awesome idea. So if you're a gluten-free organization and you're listening to this, definitely contact the other gluten-free organizations and see if they're going to do that. There is also the gluten intolerance group at gluten.org. And you can also check out www.niddk.nih.gov, which is a United States government website, Eating, Diet, and Nutrition for Celiac Disease. And then there's also celiac disease groups in Canada. So there's Canadian Celiac Association, which is the CCA, which has lots of great information. There's also the Australian Celiac Organization, which is an Australian-based government also. So the Canadian and the Australian one are government-based, and they are also great resources for celiac disease. So if you don't listen to my friend Ben, he has a gluten-free podcast. He's been on one of my seasons. I interviewed him, and I've been on his show, and he does a lot of work with the Celiac Association in Australia. All right, my friends, I hope this has been really helpful. Again, I will put those resources links down in the show notes or in the description if you're watching the YouTube video on my YouTube channel, Travel Gluten Free Podcasts. And also too, if you need some help with traveling, I have traveled extensively all over the world. I'm up to 16 countries now, and I've traveled all sorts of travels, road trips, camping, cruising. I mean, you name it. I'm the only thing I haven't done yet with gluten-free is train. And so that's what I'm working on. I will get back to you on that. But I've done all sorts of stuff. I stayed at resorts. I've stayed at airs. I've stayed at VRBOs. And so if you need help planning your trip, I can answer just a simple question via email, or if you want to sit down and I can make a customized plan for your trip, whether you're road tripping, camping, or doing something like that, I can help you with that plan. Now, I'm not a travel agent. So if you need somebody to help you with booking resorts and know the best resorts in the Mexico, Caribbean, and Disney, definitely check out Ellen at Gluten Free Vacations. She does an amazing job. She's a travel agent. She can book all your stuff. If you don't need a travel agent and you're just looking for some help with finding restaurants, I will call the restaurants for you and do all that vetting ahead of time. So that makes your travel a lot easier. So I can do a lot of the footwork for you. So hit me up on travelglutenfreepodcast.com on my contact form. I'd be glad to help you out with that. All right, friends, I hope you're having a great gluten-free day. Remember to subscribe to Travel Gluten Free Podcast on your favorite podcast player so you can get every week's episode instantly dropped to your podcast player. Have a great week, and I will see you next episode. Happy Celiac Disease Awareness Month.
Travel Gluten Free Podcast is a production of Travel Gluten Free LLC. Looking for a great way to connect with over 2,000 consumers per month? Contact Aliquity for information on sponsorship levels to boost your business. Subscribe today so you won't miss a single episode of Travel Gluten Free. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.